The wind howled like a wounded animal through the mountain pass, driving sheets of snow against the weathered boards of Sarah Mae Dawson's cabin. She pulled her woolen shawl tighter around her shoulders and added another log to the dying fire, watching the sparks dance up the chimney like tiny fireflies escaping into the storm. 30 winters she'd seen in this life, and 5 of them spent alone in this cabin perched on the edge of nowhere. The townsfolk down in Cedar Ridge called her the Hermit Woman when they were being kind, and worse things when they thought she couldn't hear. But Sarah heard everything the wind carried up from the valley, every whisper, every judgment, every cruel speculation about why a woman her age lived alone without husband or child. Cursed, they said. Touched in the head, others murmured. No decent man would have her. The church ladies clucked over their quilting circles. Sarah stirred the pot of beans hanging over the fire, the wooden spoon scraping against cast iron in a lonely rhythm. The truth was simpler and more painful than any of their gossip. She'd buried her parents in the cholera outbreak of '74, lost her brother to a mine collapse the following spring, and watched her intended, Thomas Brennan, ride off to find fortune in California goldfields, never to return. The cabin and 60 acres of stubborn land were all that remained of the Dawson legacy, and she'd be damned if she'd abandoned them for the false comfort of a loveless marriage to any of the leering bachelors who occasionally climbed the mountain with proposals reeking of desperation and whiskey. The storm intensified, rattling the shutters she'd reinforced just last month. Sarah moved to the window, peering through the frost-etched glass at the white void beyond. Nothing moved in that swirling darkness, not even the hardy elk that sometimes sheltered in the pine grove below. It was a night for staying close to the fire, for remembering better times, for trying not to think about how the walls seemed to press closer with each passing winter. She was turning back to her meager supper when she heard a sound that didn't belong to the storm. 3 deliberate knocks, slow and measured, barely audible above the wind's fury. Sarah froze, her hand instinctively moving to the loaded Springfield rifle mounted above the mantel. No one came calling in weather like this. The nearest neighbor, old Jim Morrison, lived a good 5 miles east, and he'd never venture out in a blizzard. Bandits. Not likely even desperate men had more sense than to prowl these mountains during a killing storm. The knocking came again, patient and steady. "Who's there?" Sarah called out, her voice steadier than her racing heart. A pause. Then a deep voice answered, words carefully formed but carrying an accent she recognized with a mixture of fear and curiosity. "We need shelter. My father is sick." "Apache." The word formed in her mind unbidden, carrying with it all the stories she'd heard in town raids on supply wagons, soldiers killed in ambushes, settlers found with arrows in their backs. But there was something in that voice, a quality of desperate restraint that made her hesitate with her hand on the rifle. "How many of you?" she asked. "2, just my father and me. Please, he cannot survive this storm." Sarah's mind raced. Opening that door could mean death, but leaving 2 souls to freeze in the blizzard. What kind of death was that for her own soul? Moving slowly, she took down the rifle, checked the load, and approached the door. "Step back," she commanded. "I'm armed." She lifted the heavy bar and cracked the door open, wind and snow immediately assaulting her. In the swirling white stood a figure that made her breath catch. He was massive, well over 6 feet, broad-shouldered beneath a snow-covered blanket. His face, illuminated by the faint light spilling from her cabin, was all sharp angles and dark eyes, with the unmistakable features of his people. Beside him, supported by one powerful arm, hunched a much older man, clearly struggling against the cold. "Please," the younger man said again, and she saw his eyes flick to the rifle in her hands. He made no threatening move, simply stood there in the killing cold, waiting. Something in Sarah broke or perhaps mended. "Come in," she heard herself say, stepping aside. "Quickly." They entered in a rush of snow and wind. Sarah slammed the door shut and barred it again, then turned to face her unexpected guests. The younger man was already easing his father toward the fire, his movements careful despite his obvious strength. Up close, she could see the scars crisscrossing his hands, and what was visible of his arms, the marks of a warrior, a fighter. Yet his touch with the old man was infinitely gentle. "Thank you," he said, meeting her eyes directly. "I am called Joseph Crowfeather in your language. This is my father, Samuel Whitefeather." Sarah blinked at the Christian names, so at odds with what she'd expected. The younger man, Joseph, seemed to read her surprise. "Mission names," he explained with a slight twist of his lips that might have been bitter humor. The priests insisted. The old man coughed, a harsh, rattling sound that made Sarah wince. Without thinking, she moved to help, setting the rifle aside. "Get those wet blankets off him," she ordered, her practical nature overcoming her fear. "There are dry ones in the chest by the bed." As Joseph tended to his father, Sarah bustled about, adding more wood to the fire and filling the kettle with water from the bucket by the door. Her hand shook slightly, but not from fear now. It was the strangeness of it having others in her space after so long alone. The cabin felt different with their presence, as if the very air had shifted to accommodate more than one lonely woman's existence. "The storm caught us in the open," Joseph explained as he wrapped his father in Sarah's quilts. "We were traveling to the reservation at Fort Belknap when it hit. I saw your smoke." "Lucky you did," Sarah said, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. "This storm's a killer. No one could survive it without shelter." She ladled hot water into a cup and added precious tea leaves, one of her few luxuries. The old man's hands shook as he accepted it, but his eyes, sharp and knowing despite his obvious illness, studied her with surprising intensity. "You are alone here," he said. Not a question, but a statement. Sarah stiffened. "Yes." "Brave woman," Samuel Whitefeather murmured. "Or foolish. Sometimes the same thing." Joseph made a soft sound that might have been reproach in his language. The old man waved him off with one gnarled hand. "I speak truth," Samuel said. "This one knows it." He nodded at Sarah. The alone ones always do. An uncomfortable silence settled over the cabin, broken only by the storm's fury and the crack of burning logs. Sarah busied herself at the stove, acutely aware of how small her space felt with these two men in it. Joseph sat cross-legged on the floor beside his father, his presence somehow both threatening and protective. She noticed how he positioned himself between her and the old man, but also between the door and both of them. A warrior's instincts, even in shelter. "You can sleep by the fire tonight," Sarah said finally. "The storm should blow itself out by morning." "You are kind," Joseph said. "We will leave at first light." "Not if this keeps up." "You won't," Sarah replied, glancing toward the window where snow continued to pile against the glass. "These mountain storms can last for days." The thought hung between them, days of forced proximity, of navigating the dangerous ground between two peoples who had learned to fear and hate each other. Sarah saw something flicker in Joseph's eyes, perhaps the same recognition, the same worry. "We will not bring you trouble," he said quietly. Sarah almost laughed at that. Trouble, too. Apache men in her cabin would be the talk of Cedar Ridge for years if anyone found out. She could already hear the shocked whispers, see the scandalized faces. The hermit woman, harboring savages. They'd run her out of town for certain if they didn't do worse. But looking at Samuel Whitefeather shivering despite the fire's warmth, at Joseph's scarred hands gentle as he adjusted the blankets, Sarah found she didn't much care what Cedar Ridge thought. When had they ever shown her kindness? When had they offered her anything but judgment and cold shoulders? "There's bean soup," she said instead of voicing any of this. "And cornbread from yesterday. It's not much, but it is more than nothing." Joseph interrupted, "Which is what we had." Sarah served the simple meal, noting how Joseph waited until she had taken her own portion before eating. His manners were careful, almost formal. So different from the crude behavior of the miners and cowboys who sometimes stopped by demanding food or worse. Samuel ate slowly, his son watching with concern at every labored swallow. "How long has he been ill?" Sarah asked. 3 weeks, Joseph replied. "The reservation doctor said it was lung fever, gave him medicine that did nothing." His voice carried a weight of bitterness. "I thought if I could get him to my cousin at Fort Belknap, their medicine man might—" He trailed off, staring into the fire. Sarah understood. When the white man's medicine failed, you turned to older ways. She'd done the same when her mother lay dying, sending for the Mexican curandera from the valley. It hadn't helped, but at least she'd tried everything. The evening deepened, the storm showing no signs of abating. Sarah found herself stealing glances at her guests as she mended a torn shirt by lamplight. Joseph had removed his wet outer garments, revealing a flannel shirt that had seen better days. The firelight played across his features, highlighting the strength in his jaw, the watchful intelligence in his dark eyes. He was younger than she'd first thought, perhaps only a few years older than herself. "You speak English well," she said, needing to fill the silence with something other than the wind's howling. "Mission school," he replied with that same twisted smile. "They beat it into us, literally." Sarah's needle paused. She'd heard stories about the mission schools, where Indian children were taken to be civilized. The thought of this proud man as a boy, being punished for speaking his own language, made something twist in her chest. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. Joseph looked up, surprise flickering across his features. "You apologize for what others did." "Someone should," Sarah replied. Returning to her mending, Samuel made a sound that might have been approval. "This one sees clear," he murmured to his son in English, though Sarah suspected he was capable of much more eloquent expression in his own tongue. The hours passed with strange swiftness. Sarah found herself relaxing by degrees, the expected tension of harboring strangers, Apache strangers, giving way to something almost like companionship. Joseph helped her carry in more firewood from the covered pile by the door, his strength making easy work of loads that would have taken her 3 trips. Samuel dozed fitfully, occasionally waking to cough or to observe the domestic scene with those knowing eyes. "Why do you live alone?" Joseph asked suddenly as they sat watching the fire burn low. "It is dangerous for a woman." Sarah considered how to answer. "It's my land," she said finally. "My family's. I won't abandon it." "Even though your people shun you for it." She looked at him sharply. "How do you know that?" A slight shrug. "The way you opened the door, cautious, yes, but not surprised by strangers. You expected judgment, not visitors." He paused. "I know this look. My people wear it too, when they must walk among yours." The parallel struck her silent. How strange, to find understanding from such an unexpected source. As midnight approached, Sarah prepared her guests' sleeping arrangements, laying out every spare blanket she owned near the hearth. Joseph insisted she keep her bed, positioning himself between her sleeping area and the door despite her protests that she wasn't afraid. Not about fear, he said simply, about respect. Sarah lay in her narrow bed, listening to the storm rage and the unfamiliar sounds of others breathing in her space. She should have been terrified. Should have been planning how to get word to town, how to get these dangerous men out of her home. Instead, she found herself thinking about Joseph's scarred hands, gentle with his father, about Samuel's eyes, seeing her more clearly than anyone in Cedar Ridge ever had. For the first time in 5 years, her cabin didn't feel empty. The thought terrified her more than any Apache warrior ever could. Outside, the storm howled on, sealing them together in this small, warm space while the rest of the world disappeared beneath a blanket of killing white. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges if the storm broke. If it didn't. Sarah turned her face to the wall and tried not to think about how much she hoped it wouldn't. Sarah woke to unfamiliar sounds, the soft murmur of voices, the crackle of a fire already fed. the scrape of a pot against iron. For a moment, panic seized her chest. Then memory flooded back the storm, the knock at her door, the two Apache men she'd sheltered. She lay still, listening. Should wake her. Joseph's deep voice carried softly. "Let the woman sleep," Samuel replied, his voice stronger than it had been the night before. "When did you last see such peace on a face?" Sarah felt heat rise to her cheeks. How long had they been awake, and what must they think of her, sleeping so soundly with strangers in her home? She rose quietly, wrapping her shawl around her nightdress before emerging from behind the curtain that separated her sleeping area. Joseph stood by the stove, somehow having managed to find her coffee and cook what smelled like Johnny cakes. He turned at her approach, and she saw something flicker across his face, perhaps embarrassment at being caught in such a domestic task. "I hope you don't mind," he said. "My father woke hungry." "Of course not." Sarah moved to the window, peering out at a world transformed. The storm had passed, leaving behind crystalline beauty that hurt to look at. Drifts reached halfway up the walls, and the pines beyond groaned under their white burden. Though I'm afraid we're all trapped here for a while. That snow's too deep for safe travel, especially with— She glanced at Samuel, who sat wrapped in quilts by the fire. "Especially with a sick old man," Samuel finished, his eyes crinkling with something like humor. "You can say it, daughter. These bones know their own weakness." The word daughter sent an unexpected warmth through Sarah's chest. When was the last time anyone had addressed her with such casual familiarity, such kindness? "How are you feeling?" she asked, moving to check his forehead for fever. Samuel submitted to her touch with amused patience. "Better for being warm and fed. Your kindness is good medicine." Joseph handed her a cup of coffee, and their fingers brushed in the exchange. Sarah pulled back as if burned, nearly spilling the hot liquid. She saw Joseph's jaw tighten, saw him step back to a careful distance. "I should check the livestock," Sarah said quickly, needing escape from the sudden tension. "The chickens will be half frozen." "I'll help," Joseph offered. "No need." "Please." His voice carried quiet insistence. "You've given us shelter. Let me repay with work." Sarah wanted to refuse, knew she should refuse. Being alone with him, even just in the barn, was improper by any standard. But looking at the earnest set of his shoulders, the way he held himself like a man who needed to earn his keep, she found herself nodding. They dressed warmly and fought their way through the snow to the small barn. The chickens huddled miserably in their coop, but all had survived. Sarah's milk cow, Buttercup, lowed plaintively at their arrival. "She's beautiful," Joseph said, running a gentle hand along the cow's flank. "Good lines." "You know cattle." A shadow crossed his face. "My family raised them. Before—" He stopped, turning away to fork hay into the manger. "Before the wars," Sarah finished silently. "Before the reservations. Before his people lost their freedom to roam and hunt and live as they always had." She'd heard enough in town to piece together the story, the failed treaties, the forced relocations, the way proud warriors were reduced to accepting government handouts or starving. They worked in companionable silence. Sarah gathering eggs while Joseph mucked stalls with an efficiency that spoke of long practice. She found herself stealing glances at him as he worked. Despite the scars and weathered features, there was something compelling about his face, the high cheekbones, the strong nose, the way his mouth curved slightly when he caught her looking. "What?" he asked, pausing in his work. Sarah flushed. "Nothing. You're different than I expected." "What did you expect?" There was no accusation in the question, only curiosity. "I don't know," she admitted. "The stories they tell in town?" "Ah." Joseph resumed pitching hay. "Let me guess. We're bloodthirsty savages who'd as soon scalp you as look at you." The bitterness in his voice made Sarah wince. "Something like that." "And yet you opened your door." "Yes." Why? Sarah considered the question, watching dust motes dance in the shaft of sunlight streaming through the barn's single window. Because I know what it's like to be judged by stories instead of truth. Joseph stopped working entirely then, leaning on the pitchfork to study her. The town judges you. A woman alone, refusing to marry, keeping to herself. Sarah laughed, but there was no humor in it. They've been telling stories about me for years. Witch, mad woman, worse things I won't repeat. And it doesn't bother you? Of course it bothers me. She collected the last egg, cradling it carefully. But not enough to give up my land. Not enough to pretend to be something I'm not just to make them comfortable. Joseph moved closer, and Sarah's breath caught. This close. She could see flecks of gold in his dark eyes, could smell the mixture of wood smoke and pine that clung to him. You're stronger than most, he said quietly. Or more foolish. My father would say they're the same thing. That startled a genuine laugh from her, breaking the moment's intensity. Joseph smiled a real smile that transformed his stern features into something younger, almost boyish. They returned to the cabin to find Samuel sitting up straighter. Color returned to his weathered cheeks. He watched them enter with those knowing eyes, taking in their snow-dampened clothes and the careful distance they maintained. The storm has passed, he observed. Yet we remain. The snow's too deep for travel, Sarah said quickly. You'd never make it to Fort Belknap, not until it melts some. And when will that be? Sarah and Joseph exchanged glances. In the mountains. After a storm like this, 3 days, maybe 4 if the sun stays strong. Samuel nodded slowly. Then we impose on your kindness that much longer. It's no imposition, Sarah heard herself say, and was surprised to find she meant it. The day took on a strange rhythm, domestic in a way Sarah hadn't experienced since her family died. Joseph insisted on helping with chores, splitting wood, reinforcing the chicken coop, even patching a leak in the roof he'd noticed. Sarah cooked and tended to Samuel, who dozed between bouts of storytelling that had her alternately laughing and blinking back tears. You want to hear how this one got that scar on his chin? Samuel asked, pointing at his son with one gnarled finger. 7 years old, decided he could ride the wild stallion. Father, Joseph protested, but his eyes held fond exasperation rather than real annoyance. The story that followed of a young boy's pride and the horse's inevitable victory was told with such humor that Sarah found herself relaxing completely. These weren't the savage warriors of town gossip. They were simply men, a father and son, with their own stories of triumph and foolishness, love and loss. As afternoon shadows lengthened, Sarah prepared a proper meal venison stew from her dwindling stores, cornbread, and preserved peaches she'd been saving for Christmas. Joseph watched her cook with an intensity that made her self-conscious. My mother cooked like you, he said suddenly. Quick hands, no wasted movement. She taught you well, Sarah replied, remembering his competent preparation of breakfast. She tried. A ghost of sadness crossed his features. Died when I was 12. Cavalry raid on our winter camp. Sarah's hand stilled on the spoon. I'm sorry. Long time ago. But the tightness around his eyes suggested otherwise. My parents died of cholera. She found herself sharing. 6 years passed. My brother in a mine collapsed the year after. I know how it changes you. Joseph met her eyes across the small space. Yes, he said simply. You do. Samuel coughed, breaking the moment. All this sorrow talk, death comes to everyone. Life is what matters. He fixed his son with a stern look. The living, not the dead. They ate in comfortable quiet. The only sounds, the clink of spoons against bowls and the pop of sap in the fire. Sarah couldn't remember the last time she'd shared a meal with others. There was something profoundly satisfying about watching her food disappear, about pouring coffee for hands other than her own. After supper, Joseph produced a small leather pouch from his pack. For your kindness, he said, setting it on the table. Sarah opened it to find intricate beadwork, a hair ornament of stunning beauty, all deep blues and silvers like winter sky at twilight. "I can't accept this," she breathed. "It was my mother's," Joseph said quietly. "She would want a good woman to have it." The weight of the gift, not just its beauty, but its history, made Sarah's throat tight. "Joseph!" "Please." She looked between father and son, saw Samuel's approving nod, saw something in Joseph's eyes that made her heart race. "Thank you," she managed. "It's beautiful." Evening brought unexpected ease. Samuel told more stories of his youth, of buffalo hunts and warrior societies, of the time before everything changed. Joseph whittled by the fire, his hands shaping a piece of pine into something that might have been a bird. Sarah found her mending and worked quietly, content just to listen, to be part of this temporary circle of warmth. "You don't ask the questions your people usually ask," Samuel observed during a lull in his tales. "What questions? How many whites have you killed? How many scalps have you taken?" His voice held dark amusement. "As if we keep count like pelts for trading." Sarah flushed. "I figured if you wanted me dead, you'd have done it already." Joseph's quiet laugh surprised them all. "Practical. I like that. Practical is how you survive alone." Sarah replied. "And lonely," Samuel added gently. "That too is how you survive alone." The truth of it hit her like a physical blow. Yes, she was lonely. Had been for so long she'd almost forgotten what it felt like to not be. But these past hours, sharing space and stories and simple human presence, it was like spring water after years of drought. "I manage," she said, voice rougher than intended. Samuel reached out, patting her hand with his weathered one. "Managing isn't living, daughter." Later, as they prepared for sleep, the cabin's close quarters became more apparent. Sarah strung a rope and hung a blanket to give them all some privacy, but she was acutely aware of every sound Joseph helping his father settle for the night. The rustle of blankets, the quiet murmur of words in their own language. She lay in her bed, staring at the ceiling, mind racing. Tomorrow the sun would work on the snow. In 3 days, maybe 4, the path would be clear. They would leave, these unexpected guests who'd brought such strange warmth to her cold life. Joseph would walk away with those gentle hands and sad eyes. Samuel with his wisdom and easy affection. Her cabin would return to its familiar emptiness. The thought brought an ache so sharp it stole her breath. Through the thin walls, she heard Joseph's deep voice humming something low and rhythmic, perhaps a lullaby for his father, perhaps a prayer. The sound wrapped around her like a blanket, foreign yet comforting, for the first time in years. Sarah fell asleep not to the sound of her own loneliness, but to the presence of others. The morning of the 3rd day dawned with Samuel burning with fever. Sarah woke to Joseph's urgent voice calling her name, and she rushed from her bed to find the old man trembling beneath every blanket they owned. "He was better yesterday," Joseph said. His usual composure cracked with worry. "But in the night—" Sarah placed a hand on Samuel's forehead and pulled back at the heat. His breathing came in short, labored gasps, and when he coughed, flecks of red appeared on the cloth Joseph held to his father's mouth. "We need medicine," she said. "Real medicine, not just willow bark tea." "The reservation doctor." "No," Sarah made her decision quickly. "Cedar Ridge has a doctor, a real one, trained back east, and a pharmacist with proper medicines." Joseph's face hardened. "Your town won't welcome us." "They'll have to?" She was already pulling on her heaviest dress, her winter boots. "I won't let your father die for their prejudice." "Sarah," he caught her arm as she reached for her coat. "You don't understand. For you to walk into town with us, it would mark you. Your people would—" "They already whisper about me," she interrupted. "What's a little more gossip against a man's life?" Samuel's eyes fluttered open, focusing with effort on their faces. "No," he whispered. "Not for me. Too dangerous." "Hush." Sarah said firmly. Save your strength for arguing when you're well. It took them an hour to prepare for the journey. Joseph fashioned a travois from pine poles and blankets, something to drag his father on since the old man couldn't sit a horse. Sarah hitched her sturdy mare, Clementine, to pull it while Joseph would walk alongside to steady his father. She packed what few medical supplies she had and prayed they'd be enough for the 5-mile journey to town. The snow had settled and crusted over in the past days, making travel possible, but treacherous. They moved slowly, Joseph breaking trail ahead while Sarah guided Clementine carefully through the drifts. Samuel drifted in and out of consciousness, mumbling in his native tongue. "What's he saying?" Sarah asked during one of their brief rests. Joseph's face was grim. "He's talking to my mother, telling her he's not ready to join her yet." They pressed on, the sun climbing toward noon as Cedar Ridge finally came into view. The town sat in a valley between two ridges, smoke rising from dozens of chimneys, the main street bustling with Saturday activity. Sarah's stomach knotted as they approached the outskirts. The first person to see them was Tommy Morrison, Jim Morrison's boy, out checking his father's fence line. The 12-year-old's eyes went wide as saucers before he turned and ran toward town, no doubt to spread the word. "Here it comes," Joseph murmured. By the time they reached Main Street, a crowd had gathered. Sarah kept her eyes forward, chin high, as whispers rose around them like disturbed birds. "Lord have mercy, that's Sarah Dawson. With Indians Apache by the look of 'em. Has she lost her mind? Someone fetch the sheriff." Sarah guided Clementine straight to Dr. Marcus Whitmore's house at the end of the street. The doctor, a thin man in his 60s with kind eyes behind wire spectacles, emerged before they'd even stopped. "Miss Dawson." His surprise was evident but controlled. "What's this?" "A sick man needing help," Sarah said simply. "Will you see him?" "Doctor." Whitmore's gaze moved from her to Joseph to the unconscious form on the travois. She saw him take in the situation, the risk to his reputation, the watching crowd, the simple human need before him. To his credit, he hesitated only a moment. "Bring him inside. Quickly now." They carried Samuel into the doctor's surgery, ignoring the growing crowd outside. "Doctor." Whitmore examined the old man with professional efficiency, listening to his chest, checking his fever, noting the blood-flecked sputum. "Pneumonia," he pronounced. "Advanced. He needs laudanum for the pain, quinine for the fever, and carbolic steam for his lungs. I can prepare the medicines, but—" He looked meaningfully at the window where faces pressed against the glass. "I'll pay," Sarah said. "That's not the issue, Miss Dawson. It's whether Malcolm Reed will sell them to you once he knows who they're for." Malcolm Reed ran the pharmacy 2 doors down, a pillar of the church, head of the town council, and as prejudiced a man as ever drew breath. "Then he won't know," Sarah said. "I'll say they're for me." "Sarah." Joseph spoke for the first time since entering town. "You've done enough. We'll leave." "And go where?" She rounded on him. "Fort Belknap is 2 days away in good weather. Your father doesn't have 2 hours without medicine. Stop being proud and let me help." His jaw worked, but he nodded slowly. Sarah left them in the doctor's care and walked to the pharmacy. The crowd parted before her, their whispers following like a wake. She kept her face composed, though her heart hammered against her ribs. Malcolm Reed stood behind his counter, thin mouth already pursed in disapproval. "Miss Dawson, heard you brought some visitors to town." "I need medicines," she said without preamble. "Laudanum, quinine, and carbolic acid." "That's quite a list. You feeling poorly?" "The winter's been hard." His eyes narrowed. "Funny. You looked healthy enough leading those savages down Main Street." Sarah met his gaze steadily. "Are you going to sell me the medicines or not, Mr. Reed?" "Now." "I didn't say that." He moved with deliberate slowness, gathering the requested items. Just concerned about your welfare. Miss Dawson, a woman alone, taking in strangers, Apache strangers. From what I hear, that's dangerous behavior. Your concern is noted. Is it? He set the medicines on the counter, but kept his hand on them. Because Sheriff Pike might want to have a word about harboring fugitives. They're not fugitives. They're travelers caught in a storm. Apache off the reservation without proper papers are fugitives by law. Sarah hadn't known that. She kept her face neutral. How much for the medicines? $3. It was highway robbery twice what they should cost, but Sarah pulled out the money without argument. Reed took his time counting it, then pushed the medicines across with obvious reluctance. You're making a mistake, Miss Dawson. Those people aren't like us. They're dangerous. So am I, apparently. Sarah replied, according to town gossip. She took the medicines and turned to leave, only to find Sheriff Harlan Pike blocking the doorway. He was a big man, gone to fat but still powerful, with small eyes that had always made Sarah uncomfortable. Miss Dawson, heard you brought some interesting company to town. I brought a sick old man to see a doctor. Apache. Does it matter? Pike's face flushed. It surely does. There's laws about Indians off the reservation. Then arrest them when they're well enough to stand trial. Sarah said, until then, get out of my way. Now hold on. No, Sheriff, you hold on. Sarah's patience finally snapped. That man is dying. I don't care if he's Apache, Mexican, or the Queen of England's cousin. He needs medicine, and I'm bringing it to him. You want to arrest someone, you'll have to arrest me too. But you'll do it after he gets his medicine. She pushed past Pike, surprised when he let her go. The crowd outside had grown, and now she recognized faces Mrs. Henderson from the Mercantile, Reverend Matthews, the widow Patterson who ran the boarding house, all watching her like she was a circus act. Sarah Dawson, the Reverend stepped forward. This is unseemly behavior. These are godless heathens. Judge not, Reverend, Sarah shot back, not slowing her stride. Isn't that what your Bible says? She made it back to Doc Whitmore's house, where Joseph waited by the window, tension radiating from every line of his body. Did you get them? Yes, she handed over the medicines. But we've worn out our welcome. As soon as your father can travel. Miss Dawson. Sheriff Pike had followed her in, hand resting on his gun. I'm going to need those Indians to come with me. No, Sarah said. This isn't your choice. The hell it isn't. She moved to stand beside Joseph. They're in my care. That makes it my choice. Pike's hand tightened on his gun. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Joseph stepped forward, placing himself between Sarah and the sheriff. He said nothing, made no threatening move, but his presence filled the room like a gathering storm. Joseph, no, Sarah said quietly. Please step back, ma'am. Pike said, voice harder now. This savage is threatening an officer of the law. He's standing still. Doctor, Whitmore observed from where he tended Samuel. If that's a threat, Sheriff, then we're all guilty. Pike's face went an ugly shade of red. You too. Doc, these Apache murdered settlers, killed soldiers. They're animals. This animal hasn't left his father's side for 3 days, Sarah said. This savage has shown more humanity than anyone in this room. The standoff stretched taut. Through the window, Sarah could see more townspeople gathering. Some had rifles. The situation was spiraling toward violence. Then Samuel's weak voice cut through the tension. Joseph, come! Joseph moved immediately to his father's side, kneeling beside the cot. Samuel's eyes were clearer thanks to the laudanum, though his breathing remained labored. No blood, the old man whispered in English, loud enough for all to hear. Not for me. Too much blood already. He looked past his son to Sheriff Pike. We go. When I can stand, we go. You have my word." Pike shifted uncomfortably. It was hard to maintain the image of bloodthirsty savages when faced with a dying old man pleading for peace.
3 days, Sarah said quickly. "Give us 3 days for the medicine to work. Then they'll leave peacefully."
"And go where?" Pike demanded. "Fort Belknap, the reservation, where you want them to be." Pike looked between them all, Sarah defiant, Joseph silent, Samuel dying, and Doc Whitmore calmly preparing another dose of medicine. The crowd outside pressed closer, waiting for his decision. 3 days, he said finally. "But I'm posting a guard. And Miss Dawson, you've made your choice today. This town won't forget it." He stomped out, taking some of the tension with him. Sarah's knees suddenly felt weak, and she sank into a chair. "You shouldn't have done that," Joseph said quietly. "Your life here." "My life here was already nothing they approved of." Sarah interrupted. "At least now it stands for something." "Doctor." Whitmore administered the medicines, showing Sarah how to prepare the carbolic steam for Samuel's lungs. As he worked, he said quietly, "That was brave. Miss Dawson, foolish perhaps, but brave." "My father says they're the same thing," Joseph said. And despite everything, Sarah found herself almost smiling. They stayed at the doctor's house through the afternoon, Samuel's breathing gradually easing as the medicines took effect. The crowd outside eventually dispersed, though Sarah noticed men with rifles stationed at either end of the street, Pike's guards, making sure the savages didn't escape. As evening approached, Dr. Whitmore pulled Sarah aside. "He's stable enough to move, if you go carefully. But Miss Dawson, you know you can't take them back to your cabin." "Why not?" "Because half the town will follow. That's why. Pike's already talking about forming a committee to investigate Indian sympathizers. You've painted a target on yourself." Sarah looked at Joseph, who was gently helping his father sit up. "Then they've got good aim. We leave within the hour." The journey back was tense, shadows lengthening across the snow as they retraced their morning path. Joseph walked beside the travois with rifle in hand now, alert for pursuit, but whether due to the coming darkness or the doctor's influence, no one followed. As her cabin came into view, Sarah felt a mixture of relief and dread. She was home, but home would never feel the same. The town's judgment, always present but bearable, had transformed into something harder and more dangerous. "You've lost your place," Samuel said weakly as they helped him inside. "For us, strangers?" "No," Sarah said firmly, stoking the fire back to life. "I found it." Joseph's eyes met hers across his father's form, and in them she saw understanding, gratitude, and something deeper that made her pulse quicken despite everything. The warmth of the cabin embraced them, shutting out the cold and the judgment and the fear. For now, they were safe. For now, they were together. But 3 days would pass quickly, and Sarah knew the hardest choices still lay ahead. The medicine worked its slow magic through the night. Sarah barely slept, rising every few hours to prepare the carbolic steam for Samuel's lungs, to spoon broth between his cracked lips, to cool his fever with damp cloths. Joseph helped her, their movements falling into a rhythm born of shared purpose. They spoke little, but the silence between them had changed, charged now with unspoken understanding. By morning, Samuel's breathing came easier. He managed to sit up and take solid food, his eyes clearer than they'd been in days. "You should rest," he told Sarah, noting the shadows beneath her eyes. "This old body has weathered worse storms." "I've rested enough," Sarah lied, busying herself with washing the breakfast dishes. Joseph had gone out to tend the animals and check the perimeter old habits of wariness that their trip to town had only reinforced. Through the window, Sarah watched him move through the snow with that particular grace of his, alert to every sound and shadow. "You care for him," Samuel observed quietly. Sarah's hands stilled in the wash water. "I care for both of you,"
You're my guests."
Ah! Samuel's knowing smile reminded her uncomfortably of her own father.
"And when guests leave, the caring stops. It has to."
The words came out harsher than intended. "Why?"
"You know why."
Sarah dried her hands with sharp movements.
"Your son is Apache.
I'm a white woman already suspect in my community. Even if things were different, there's no future in it."
"Future,"
Samuel mused.
"Strange word. My people say the future is just a dream we haven't woken from yet.
Only the present is real." "That's beautiful philosophy."
Sarah said, "But it doesn't change the law, or the way people think."
"No," Samuel agreed.
"But laws change. People change.
Sometimes all it takes is one person brave enough to live differently." Before Sarah could respond, Joseph burst through the door, bringing cold air and urgency with him. "Riders coming. 6, maybe 7. Sarah's blood chilled.
"How far?"
10 minutes, maybe less. They moved quickly. Sarah grabbed her rifle while Joseph helped his father to a corner where he'd be protected if shooting started. But Samuel pushed away his son's hands. "No," he said firmly. "No hiding, no fighting. We face them standing." "Father, would you have her blood on this floor? Would you prove them right about what we are?" Samuel struggled to his feet, leaning heavily on Joseph's arm. "We are not animals to be cornered. We are men." The riders arrived in a thunder of hooves, Sheriff Pike at their head. Sarah recognized the others: Malcolm Reed from the pharmacy, Carl Henderson from the mercantile, the Watson brothers who ran cattle on the eastern range, hard men with hard faces, bristling with weapons. Sarah stepped onto the porch, rifle visible but not raised. Joseph and Samuel emerged behind her, the old man standing as straight as his illness allowed.
"Sheriff,"
Sarah acknowledged.
"You're early. We agreed on 3 days."
"That was before we learned some interesting facts," Pike said, not dismounting. "Seems your friends here aren't just any Apache. That one," he pointed at Joseph, "is wanted for questioning about raids on supply wagons last spring. Goes by the name Joseph Crowfeather, but the Army knows him as something else." Sarah felt Joseph tense behind her. "I don't care what the Army. They call him Ghost Warrior." Pike continued, satisfaction clear in his voice. "On account of how he can slip in and out of places without being seen. Lot of dead soldiers left wondering how he does it." He leaned forward in his saddle. "That's who you're harboring. Miss Dawson, a killer." Sarah turned to look at Joseph. His face had gone still as stone, but he didn't deny it.
"Is it true?"
she asked quietly. "I fought for my people," Joseph said, meeting her gaze. "When they came to take our land, to move us like cattle. Yes, I fought. I'm not proud of killing, but I'm not ashamed of defending what was ours." "You see," Reed spoke up, voice thick with righteousness. "He admits it. Sheriff, do your duty." Pike dismounted slowly, hand on his gun. "Joseph Crowfeather, by the authority vested in me, you're under arrest. Come peaceful, and we'll see you get to Fort Union for military trial. Resist." He let the threat hang. "No," Sarah stepped between them.
"He came here in peace. He's caused no trouble."
"Step aside, Miss Dawson," Pike warned. "I said no."
"Then you're under arrest too, for harboring a fugitive."
"So arrest me." The tension stretched taut. 7 armed men against 1 woman, 1 wanted warrior, and 1 sick elder. The odds were laughable, but Sarah didn't move. Then Samuel spoke, his voice carrying surprising strength. "I know you," he said to Pike. "Not your face. Your kind. I've seen you in blue coats and gray, in settlers' clothes and soldiers' uniforms. Always the same, always so afraid." "I ain't afraid of you, old man," Pike growled. "No," Samuel smiled sadly. "Then why do you need 7 men with guns to arrest one who hasn't drawn a weapon? Why do you shake when you see my son standing peaceful beside this good woman?" "Father," Joseph warned quietly. But Samuel continued. You fear us because we remind you of what you took. Every Apache face is a mirror showing your theft, so you must make us monsters to justify your crimes. That's enough philosophy, Henderson spat. Sheriff, we doing this or not? Pike's hand moved to his gun, and everything happened at once. Joseph pushed Sarah aside just as Pike drew. The sheriff's shot went wide, splintering wood from the doorframe. Joseph could have rushed him then, could have fought, but instead he dropped to his knees, hands raised. No shooting, he called out. I surrender. No one needs to die here.
Joseph.
Sarah reached for him, but he shook his head. They want me, not you, not my father. He looked up at Pike. I'll come, but you leave them alone.
No, Sarah said desperately. Joseph, they'll hang you.
Maybe. His eyes found hers, soft with something that made her chest ache. But you'll be safe. That matters more. Touching, Reed sneered. The savage has feelings. Sarah whirled on him. The only savages I see are the ones who need 7 guns to take 1 man. Enough. Pike hauled Joseph to his feet, rough with rope on his wrists. Reed, Henderson, search the place. Make sure there's no other fugitives hiding. The men ransacked Sarah's home with deliberate cruelty, overturning furniture, scattering her few possessions, tearing through cupboards. Sarah stood rigid, fists clenched, watching her sanctuary be violated. They found nothing, of course, just the meager possessions of a woman living alone and the traveling packs of 2 Apache men. Satisfied? Sarah asked when they emerged. Not nearly, Reed said. You've shown your true colors. Sarah Dawson, choosing savages over your own kind, there'll be consequences. I chose humanity over hatred, Sarah shot back. If that makes me a traitor in your eyes, so be it. Pike was already loading Joseph onto a horse, the warrior's hands bound tight. Samuel had sunk back against the doorframe, the confrontation having drained his renewed strength. Please. Sarah appealed to Pike one last time. Let me treat his wounds at least. The rope's cutting. He should have thought of that before he started killing white folks, Pike said. He mounted his own horse, then looked down at Sarah with something almost like pity. You had a chance to be respectable, Miss Dawson, to find a place in this community. You threw it away for this. Sarah moved to stand beside Samuel, one hand on the old man's shoulder. I threw away nothing. I found something worth keeping. Your funeral, Pike said. He wheeled his horse around. Move out. The riders thundered away, Joseph bound and silent among them. Sarah watched until they disappeared over the ridge, her heart breaking with each hoofbeat. Beside her, Samuel swayed, and she quickly supported him back inside. The cabin looked like a tornado had struck. Sarah settled Samuel by the fire and began mechanically righting furniture, picking up scattered belongings. Her hands shook as she worked. You love him, Samuel said. It wasn't a question. Sarah's hand stilled on a broken picture frame, the last image of her family, now cracked down the middle. It doesn't matter. It's the only thing that matters. They'll hang him. The words came out raw. For fighting to protect his land, his people, they'll put a rope around his neck and call it justice. Perhaps, perhaps not. Samuel leaned back, eyes distant. My son is resourceful, and the army, sometimes they prefer live Apache scouts to dead warriors. You think they'll offer him a deal? To betray his people, track other renegades. Samuel's smile was bitter. Yes, they'll offer, but Joseph will never accept. He'd die first. Sarah sank into a chair, suddenly exhausted. The last days crashed over her, the storm, the unexpected guests, the trip to town, the violent intrusion, and through it all, Joseph's quiet strength, his gentle hands, the way he looked at her like she was something precious. I should go after them, she said.
Plead his case. Find a lawyer.
With what money, with what influence? Samuel shook his head. You've already sacrificed your standing. Don't sacrifice your life, too.
Then what?
Desperation edged into her voice.
I just let them take him. Let them murder him for the crime of being Apache.
Samuel was quiet for a long moment. Then, sometimes the bravest thing is to survive, to bear witness, to remember. He looked at her with those ancient eyes. You gave us shelter in a storm. You stood against your people for strangers. That story will be told around Apache fires for generations. That matters. Stories won't save him.
No, but they save us. They remind us that not all hearts are closed, that even in the darkest times, some choose love over fear.
He paused. My grandmother used to say that love is the only rebellion that matters. You rebelled today. Daughter. Sarah let the tears come then. Silent streams down her cheeks. Outside, snow began to fall again. Gentle flakes erasing the violent marks of horses and men. The cabin felt enormous in its emptiness. Even with Samuel there, she'd grown accustomed to Joseph's presence so quickly, his careful movements, his rare smiles, the way he made her feel both safe and dangerously alive. Tell me about him, she said finally. Tell me who he really is. Not ghost warrior or the savage they think they know. Tell me about your son. Samuel's face softened.
He was born in the moon of greening leaves.
The old man talked through the afternoon, painting pictures of a boy who tamed wild horses with patience instead of force, who learned healing songs from his grandmother, who could have been a peace chief if the world had been different. Sarah listened, memorizing every word, building a fuller picture of the man who'd walked into her life and changed everything. As evening fell, Samuel's strength flagged again. Sarah helped him to bed Joseph's bed. She realized with a pang and prepared more medicine.
Rest now, she said. Tomorrow we'll figure out what to do.
Tomorrow, Samuel murmured. Already drifting. Always tomorrow with your people, never today. Sarah sat by the dying fire, rifle across her knees, watching the door. Part of her hoped Pike would return, would give her an excuse to fight, but the night remained quiet except for wind and memory. In the morning, she decided, she would go to town again. Not to plead Pike was right that she had no influence left, but to find out where they were taking Joseph, to learn what she could about his fate. It wasn't much, but it was something. For now, she kept vigil in her violated home, guarding a sick old man and nursing a heart that had learned to hope too late. Dawn came gray and bitter, matching Sarah's mood as she prepared for another trip to town. Samuel had insisted on coming despite his weakness, claiming he needed to purchase supplies for the remainder of their journey. Sarah knew better the old man wanted to learn his son's fate as desperately as she did. They traveled in tense silence, the memory of yesterday's violence hanging between them like frozen breath. Sarah had hidden her rifle under the wagon seat, though she knew it was foolish to think one gun could make a difference if Pike decided to finish what he'd started. Cedar Ridge looked different in the morning light, smaller, meaner, its false-fronted buildings like sneering faces. People stopped and stared as their wagon rolled down Main Street. But where yesterday there had been curiosity, today Sarah saw only hostility and satisfaction. The lioness returns to the den, Samuel murmured, brave or foolish?
Both,
Sarah replied, pulling up outside the general store. Stay in the wagon. I'll be quick. But as she climbed down, Mrs. Henderson emerged from the mercantile, flanked by several other women from the church auxiliary. Their faces wore the righteous expression of those about to deliver judgment.
Sarah Dawson.
Mrs. Henderson began, her voice carrying across the street.
We've come to a decision about your situation. I didn't realize my situation required your input.
Sarah replied evenly. When you bring dangerous elements into our community, it becomes everyone's concern. The woman's thin lips pursed tighter.
The Ladies' Christian Society has voted. You are no longer welcome at church services, social gatherings, or any respectable establishment in this town." Sarah felt the words like physical blows, but kept her chin high. "Is that all?" "Furthermore, Mrs. Henderson continued, clearly disappointed by Sarah's lack of visible distress. "We've spoken to Mr. Morrison about your eastern boundary dispute. He's decided to pursue full legal action. I imagine you'll find it difficult to maintain that land without being able to purchase supplies or hire help." The threat was clear economic strangulation, designed to force her out. Sarah's hands clenched in her skirts. "And if I sold to one of you fine Christian ladies' husbands instead?" she asked. "Would that restore my respectability?" "Mrs." Henderson's face flushed. "Your mockery only proves how far you've fallen. Consorting with savages, defending murderers." "The only murderers I see wear badges and righteousness." Sarah shot back. A hand touched her shoulder Samuel, who had climbed down from the wagon despite her instructions. He stood straight despite his obvious weakness, dignity wrapped around him like armor. "We need nothing from your stores," he said quietly. "Only information. Where have they taken my son?" "The savage speaks," one of the women gasped. "The father speaks," Samuel corrected gently, "as any father would." Sheriff Pike chose that moment to emerge from his office, hooks, thumbs in his gun belt. "Causing trouble already? Miss Dawson." "We came for supplies," Sarah said. "And information. Where is Joseph?" Pike's smile was unpleasant. "The prisoner on his way to Fort Union? The Army's mighty interested in talking to the famous ghost warrior." "When is the trial?" "Trial?" Pike laughed. "Military tribunal don't work like civilian court. Miss Dawson, could be weeks, could be days. Either way, hemp rope is cheap and the Army's got plenty." Sarah's vision blurred with rage, but Samuel's hand on her arm kept her grounded. "Thank you for the information," the old man said with grave courtesy. "We will trouble you no more." "See that you don't." Pike's eyes narrowed. "In fact, old man, you've got 24 hours to move on. Your 3 days are up." "He's still recovering," Sarah began. 24 hours, Pike repeated. "Or I'll arrest you both." They left empty-handed, the stores refusing their custom, whispers following like carrion birds. As Sarah helped Samuel back into the wagon, she noticed a small figure dart from the alley Tommy Morrison, the boy who'd first spotted them. "Miss Dawson," he whispered, glancing around nervously. "My PA says I shouldn't talk to you, but—" He pressed something into her hand. "Doc Whitmore said to give you this. Said you'd understand." It was a folded paper. Sarah tucked it quickly into her coat. "Thank you, Tommy." The boy ran off before she could say more. Sarah climbed into the wagon and headed out of town, feeling the weight of watching eyes until they cleared the last building. Only when they were well away did she unfold the paper. It was a telegram, addressed to Dr. Whitmore. "Military transport delayed by weather stop, prisoner transfer postponed to Thursday. Stop will hold at Fort Mason until then stop." Fort Mason, Samuel breathed. "That's only a day's ride north." Sarah's heart began to race. "Thursday, that gives us 2 days. "Us," Samuel studied her face. "What are you thinking, daughter?" "I'm thinking—" Sarah paused, the plan forming even as she spoke. "I'm thinking that military camps are full of supplies, food, medicine, blankets, things that sometimes go missing. You would steal from the Army." "I would trade with enterprising soldiers who might appreciate additional income." Sarah's smile held no humor. "And if while conducting such business, I happen to learn about prisoner transport procedures—" Samuel was quiet for a long moment. Then, "This is dangerous thinking." "Yes. You could hang beside him." "Yes. Then we need a better plan than hope and desperation." Sarah looked at him in surprise. You think I would let you attempt this alone? My son chose to protect you. I choose the same." His weathered face creased in what might have been a smile. "Besides, an old Apache can go places a white woman cannot." They spent the rest of the journey planning. By the time they reached Sarah's cabin, they had the bones of something that might work. The cabin felt strange without Joseph's presence, every corner holding memory. Sarah busied herself with preparations while Samuel rested, gathering supplies they'd need for the journey. Her father's old uniform from the Mexican War, mothballed in a trunk, a bottle of whiskey for bribes, what little money she had saved. As night fell, Sarah found herself standing at the window where Joseph had kept watch. The snow stretched endlessly, unmarked by human passage. Somewhere beyond those white hills, he sat in chains, waiting for military justice that would be no justice at all. "Second thoughts?" Samuel asked from his chair by the fire. "No," Sarah turned from the window. "Only wondering if I've lost my mind." "Probably." Samuel's eyes twinkled. "But what good is sanity if it means living with regret?" They set out before dawn, taking back trails Sarah knew from years of solitary wandering. The weather held clear but cold, their breath steaming in the frigid air. Samuel rode better than she'd expected, the urgency of their mission seeming to lend him strength. Fort Mason squatted on a rise overlooking the North Fork River, a collection of log buildings surrounded by a wooden palisade. Smoke rose from multiple chimneys, and Sarah could see soldiers moving about their duties. The stars and stripes snapped in the wind above the commander's quarters. They made camp in a grove of cottonwoods a mile from the fort, close enough to observe but far enough to avoid patrols. As dusk fell, Sarah changed into her father's uniform. It hung loose on her frame, but with her hair pinned up under the cap and dirt smudged on her face, she might pass for a young soldier in the dark. "Remember," Samuel cautioned, "soldiers are creatures of routine. Watch for patterns. When do they change guards? When is the evening meal? When do they—" He stopped, head cocked. A moment later, Sarah heard it too. Horses approaching their camp. She reached for her rifle, but Samuel held up a hand. 3 riders emerged from the tree line, Apache by their dress and bearing, though they wore reservation tags on their shirts. The lead rider, a woman perhaps 40 years old with striking features, dismounted gracefully. "White feather," she said in accented English. "We heard you were in trouble." Samuel's face transformed. "Mary Elk woman, how?" "News travels on the wind," she replied, "especially news of Joseph Crowfeather in chains." Her dark eyes moved to Sarah, and of the white woman who stood for him. Sarah felt exposed under that penetrating gaze, but she held her ground. "I'm Sarah Dawson. I know who you are." Mary Elk woman stepped closer. "The question is, do you know who you are, what you risk?" "I know Joseph doesn't deserve to die for defending his people." "No, but many have, deserving or not." The woman studied Sarah's uniform with interest. "You plan to enter the fort?" "Yes." "Alone?" "If necessary." Mary Elk woman exchanged glances with her companions, 2 younger men who watched the surrounding woods with warriors' vigilance. "Perhaps not necessary." She smiled, and it transformed her stern features. "We too have business at Fort Mason, selling beadwork to soldiers who miss their sweethearts. They expect us tomorrow, like every week." Understanding dawned. "You could create distraction, learn where they hold him, perhaps." Mary Elk woman's expression grew serious. "But know this, white woman, if we help you and fail, it means death for all of us. My children will lose their mother, my husband, his wife. Are you prepared for that weight?" Sarah thought of Joseph's hands, gentle despite their scars, of his rare smile, of the way he'd made her empty cabin feel like home. "Yes," she said simply. Mary Elk woman nodded slowly. "Then we plan and pray. And tomorrow, we see if love is stronger than chains." They talked through the night, refining their plan, accounting for contingencies. The Apache women knew the fort's routines from months of trading visits. They knew which soldiers could be bribed, which were cruel, which might look the other way for the right price. As dawn approached, Sarah felt the weight of what they were attempting. It was madness, a desperate gamble that could end with all of them dead or imprisoned. But the alternative was accepting Joseph's death, returning to her empty cabin, living with the knowledge that she'd done nothing. "You could still turn back," Samuel said quietly as she prepared to leave. "No one would blame you." "I would blame me," Sarah replied. "Every day for the rest of my life." He reached out, touching her face with one gnarled hand, a father's blessing. "Then go, daughter, and bring my son home." Sarah mounted her horse, uniform rough against her skin, heart hammering with fear and determination. Behind her, Mary Elk Woman and her companions prepared their own approach, innocent traders with nothing more dangerous than beadwork and gossip. Fort Mason waited, solid and forbidding in the morning light. Somewhere within those walls, Joseph sat in chains. By nightfall, he would be free, or they would all be beyond the reach of earthly justice. Sarah touched the pocket where she'd placed her mother's wedding ring, her last valuable possession. Saved for bribes. Then she spurred her horse toward the fort, riding straight into the mouth of danger. The day of reckoning had come. The night stretched endless as Sarah stood by the cabin window, her father's uniform laid out on the bed behind her. Tomorrow's plan ran through her mind again and again. So many things could go wrong. So many lives hung in the balance. Not just Joseph's, but Samuel's, Mary Elk Woman's, her companions, and her own. A soft cough drew her attention. Samuel sat by the dying fire, his weathered face etched with pain he'd been hiding all day. The ride had taken more from him than he'd admitted. "You should rest," Sarah said, moving to add wood to the fire. "Rest comes when the spirit is easy," Samuel replied. "Tonight, my spirit wrestles with shadows." Sarah sank into the chair across from him. "You think we're wrong to try?" "No, but I think of my son in chains, of you risking everything for a man you've known mere days." His dark eyes studied her. "Tell me truly, why?" The question hung between them like smoke. Sarah could have given easy answers. It was the right thing to do. She couldn't stand injustice. She owed them for their kindness. All true, but not the truth. "When he looks at me," she said finally, "I don't see judgment or pity or calculation. I see—" She struggled for words. "I see myself reflected as something worthwhile, something whole. I haven't felt that since my family died." Samuel nodded slowly. "And when you look at him—" "I see home." Sarah whispered, "Is that foolish to feel that way so quickly?" "My people say the heart knows its mate like the eagle knows the sky. No time needed, only recognition." He leaned back, wincing slightly. "But knowing and having are different things." "What do you mean?" "If we succeed tomorrow, if Joseph goes free, what then? You cannot live among my people. He cannot live among yours. Love does not erase the world's boundaries." Sarah had been trying not to think that far ahead. "We'll find a way. Perhaps. Or perhaps love means letting go." Samuel's voice grew distant. "I loved his mother like breath itself. But when the soldiers came, when I had to choose between fighting for our land or keeping her safe," he trailed off, lost in memory. "What did you choose?" "I chose fighting. She died in the winter camp raids while I was gone playing warrior." His laugh held no humor. "Joseph never blamed me, but I see her ghost in his eyes sometimes. The price of my choices." Sarah reached across the space between them, covering his gnarled hand with hers. "You couldn't have known." "No, but I could have chosen differently." He turned his hand to squeeze hers gently. "That's why I tell you this. Daughter, whatever comes tomorrow, choose with your eyes open. Choose knowing the price. They sat in comfortable silence as the fire burned low. Outside, wind whispered through the pines, carrying the scent of coming snow. Sarah tried to imagine a future beyond tomorrow. Where would they go? How would they live? But every path her mind traveled ended at the same walls Samuel described. "I need to tell you something," she said suddenly. "About the plan. Mary Elk Woman and I discussed—" A knock at the door cut her off. 3 soft raps, then 2 more, the signal they'd agreed on. Sarah grabbed her rifle and approached cautiously. "Who's there?" "Friends in moonlight," came the response, another agreed-upon phrase. She unbarred the door to find Mary Elk Woman and one of her companions. Both looked tense, and there was blood on the young man's sleeve. "What happened?" Sarah ushered them inside quickly. "Soldiers," Mary Elk Woman said tersely. "They came to the reservation today, looking for Apache who might try to free Joseph. Someone talked." Sarah's heart sank. Then they know. They suspect, but suspicion is not knowing. Mary Elk Woman moved to warm herself by the fire, nodding respectfully to Samuel. "Still, security at the fort will be tighter. They may have moved Joseph already." "No," the young man spoke up. "I scouted close, heard soldiers talking. The ghost warrior is still there. They plan to move him at dawn, not wait for Thursday." "Dawn?" Sarah's mind raced. "That changes everything. We won't have time." "We have tonight," Mary Elk Woman interrupted. "If we dare." Sarah looked between them all, Samuel sick and exhausted. Mary Elk Woman risking her family. The young warrior already injured. "It's too dangerous now. We should—" "Should what?" Samuel's voice cut sharp. "Wait for another chance that won't come. Let fear choose for us. I'm trying to keep everyone alive." "Life without honor is not life," the young warrior said quietly. "Joseph Crowfeather saved my sister's child when the soldiers burned our winter stores. I owe him breath for breath." Mary Elk Woman placed a hand on Sarah's shoulder. "The plan can work, but not in daylight as we thought. Tonight, under cover of darkness, the guards. Change shift at midnight. For perhaps 10 minutes, the stockade is less watched. If you can get inside, then—" Sarah closed her eyes, weighing chances that grew slimmer by the moment. But what was the alternative? Let Joseph be taken to Fort Union to certain death. "All right," she said, "but we go now. No more waiting." They moved with urgent efficiency. Sarah changed into the uniform while Mary Elk Woman applied dirt and shadows to her face, aging her features, making her anonymous in darkness. The young warrior who finally introduced himself as Daniel Spotted Horse sketched the fort's layout in the dirt by firelight. "The stockade is here, northwest corner. 1 door, usually 2 guards, but tonight maybe more. The midnight shift comes from the barracks here, walks this path. You have from when they leave until they arrive." "And Joseph will be ready?" Sarah asked. "We'll make sure," Mary Elk Woman said. "My cousin works laundry at the fort. She'll get word to him." So many pieces that had to fall perfectly in place. Sarah strapped on her father's service pistol, checked the loads. Her hands were steady despite the fear churning in her stomach. "I'm coming with you," Samuel announced, struggling to his feet. "No," Joseph said firmly. "You can barely ride." "I can sit a horse long enough to hold the spare mount," the old man insisted. "You'll need every hand." Before anyone could argue further, he was moving toward his pack, pulling out items Sarah hadn't seen before: a medicine bag, an eagle feather, objects wrapped in soft leather. "Come here, daughter." Sarah knelt before him, and he began to sing softly in Apache, touching her forehead with something that smelled of sage and cedar. The others joined in, their voices low and haunting in the small cabin. Sarah didn't understand the words, but she felt their power blessing, protection, courage gifted from one heart to another. When it was done, Samuel pressed something into her hand, a small carved stone, warm from his touch. This was Joseph's, made when he became a man. Give it to him.
Tell him, he paused, swallowing hard. Tell him his father is proud. They rode out into bitter darkness, 5 figures against the night. Sarah's uniform chafed against her skin, the weight of deception heavy on her shoulders. Beside her, Daniel's spotted horse moved like his name suggested, silently, almost invisibly. Mary Elk Woman had stayed behind with Samuel, who was in no condition for hard riding despite his protests. Fort Mason loomed ahead, torchlight flickering on its walls. Sarah could see sentries walking their routes, the precise military rhythm that would be their salvation or doom. They left the horses in a stand of cottonwoods, Daniel holding them ready for quick escape. Sarah checked her father's pocket watch, 11:42. 18 minutes. She approached the fort's side gate, the one used for supplies and less important traffic. Her heart hammered so loud she was sure the sentries would hear it, but she kept her pace steady, mimicking the slightly unsteady walk of a soldier who'd had a few drinks in town. Halt, who goes there? Sarah affected a slurred voice, keeping her face down. Private Collins, sir, got separated from my unit. The sentry peered at her in the darkness. Collins don't know any, Transfer from Fort Bridger. Sarah interrupted, swaying slightly. Been riding 2 days. Just need to report in. The man hesitated. Sarah could feel his suspicion, saw his hand move toward his rifle. This was the moment, believe the lie or raise the alarm. Then, blessedly, shouts rose from the other side of the fort. Mary Elk Woman's distraction, her companions starting a commotion at the main gate, claiming soldiers had cheated them in trade that day. Damn Indians, the sentry muttered. He looked back at Sarah, impatience overcoming caution. Get inside and find the duty officer, and next time, don't get separated from your unit. He opened the gate just enough for her to slip through. Sarah muttered thanks and stumbled into the fort, every nerve screaming danger. 11:51, 9 minutes. She moved through shadows, avoiding the pools of torchlight. The stockade was exactly where Daniel had set a squat log structure with one iron-reinforced door. 2 guards stood outside, looking bored and cold. Sarah's plan had been to bluff her way close, then use the pistol to force them to open the door. But as she watched, she saw something that changed everything. One of the guards was young, barely more than a boy, fear clear in his posture. He kept glancing toward the main gate where the shouting continued. She made a decision. Stepping into the light, she walked directly toward them with military bearing. You two, the captain wants you at the main gate. Some kind of Indian trouble. The older guard frowned. We're posted here until those savages burn down the whole fort, Sarah snapped, channeling every officer's bark she'd ever heard. Move, I'll watch the prisoner. The young guard was already moving, relief clear on his face. The older one hesitated a moment longer, then cursed and followed. 5 minutes? He called back. Then we return. 11:55. 5 minutes. Sarah's hands shook as she lifted the bar on the stockade door. Inside, darkness and the smell of unwashed bodies. Joseph. Movement in the shadows. Then his voice, cracked with thirst but unmistakably his Sarah. He emerged into the dim light, shackled hand and foot, face bruised from rough handling. But his eyes lit up with something that made her heart constrict. What are you, how? No time. She produced the key ring she'd lifted from the young guard's belt as he passed. Her father had taught her that trick years ago, though he'd never imagined she'd use it for this. The shackles fell away with a clatter that seemed deafening. 11:57, 3 minutes. They ran, Joseph's hand in hers, through shadows toward the side gate. Behind them, the commotion at the main entrance was dying down. Soon the guards would return, find the empty cell, raise the... Halt! A soldier stepped out from behind a supply wagon, rifle aimed. Not one of the stockade guards, a random patrol. The one thing they couldn't plan for. Joseph moved before Sarah could think,
Launching himself at the man, they went down in a tangle of limbs, wrestling for the rifle. Sarah heard the sound of impact fist on flesh, then Joseph was up, pulling her onward. 11:59, 1 minute. They burst through the side gate to find Daniel mounted and ready, holding their horses. Joseph vaulted onto his mount with the ease of a man born to horseback, pulling Sarah up behind him. Then the alarm bell began to toll. They rode hard into darkness, gunshots cracking behind them. Sarah pressed her face against Joseph's back, feeling the bunch and release of his muscles as he guided the horse with expert skill. Daniel led them on paths no white soldier would know, through streams to break their trail, over ridges that would challenge daylight riders. Only when the sounds of pursuit faded did they slow. Sarah realized she was crying relief, fear, joy, all mingled in tears that froze on her cheeks. "Sarah," Joseph turned in the saddle to look at her. "You came for me." "Of course I did." His hand found hers, gripping tight. "They'll hunt us now. You can never go home." "I know." And she did know, had known from the moment she put on her father's uniform. That cabin was never home anyway, just a place to hide from living. They reached the cottonwood grove as dawn painted the eastern sky. Mary Elk Woman and Samuel waited with packed horses and supplies. When Samuel saw his son, his composed face finally cracked, tears flowing freely as they embraced. "My boy," he whispered, "my brave boy." Joseph held his father gently, mindful of the old man's fragility. Over Samuel's shoulder, his eyes met Sarah's again. In them she saw the same question that burned in her chest. What now? "North," Mary Elk Woman said decisively. "Canada, beyond the reach of the army. My cousin's band crossed last winter. They'll take you in." "All of us?" Sarah asked. Mary studied her with those penetrating eyes. "You've chosen your path, Sarah Dawson. The old world is closed to you now. Will you walk the new one?" Sarah thought of her empty cabin, the town that had rejected her, the life of silent suffocation she'd been living. Then she looked at Joseph, at Samuel, at these people who'd shown her more genuine care in days than Cedar Ridge had in years. "Yes," she said simply. As the sun rose, they prepared for the long journey north. Joseph came to her as she adjusted her saddle, pressing something into her hand. The carved stone Samuel had given her to return. "Keep it," he said softly. "My father was right to give it to you. You've earned your place among us." "I'm not Apache." "No, but you have an Apache heart, brave, loyal, willing to sacrifice for what's right." He touched her face gently. "My heart." Sarah leaned into his touch, this moment of stillness amid chaos. "They'll follow us." "Let them follow." His voice held quiet confidence. "We know these mountains, and we have something they don't." "What's that?" "Each other." As they mounted up to ride, Sarah looked back once toward the life she was leaving. Then she turned her face north, toward uncertainty and freedom, and the man who'd taught her that home wasn't a place, but a choice. The storm had passed. The journey had begun. They had been riding north for 3 days when the inevitable came. Sarah spotted the dust cloud first, a brown smudge against the crystal morning sky that meant only one thing, riders, moving fast. "Joseph," she called quietly, pointing south. He reined in beside her, studying the horizon with eyes trained by years of watching for danger. 2 hours, maybe less, he judged. 20 men at least. Samuel, who had been dozing in his saddle, jerked awake. Despite the medicine and rest, the hard travel was taking its toll. His face had gone gray beneath its weathered brown, and he swayed even while sitting still. "We should find defensive ground," Daniel's spotted horse suggested, already scanning the terrain. "No," Joseph's voice was firm. "Father can't survive a running fight, and they'll have trackers hiding only delays what's coming.
Mary Elk Woman moved her horse closer. There's another way. Split up. They want you and Sarah, not us. We take Samuel east to my cousin's camp. You two continue north. Draw them away. I won't leave my father, Joseph said immediately. And I won't let you face them alone, Samuel added, straightening with effort. We stand together, or... His words were cut off by a coughing fit that left blood on his lips. Sarah quickly dismounted to support him, feeling the tremors that shook his frame.
He needs rest and medicine, not a chase,
she said quietly to Joseph.
Mary's right. We're the ones they want.
Joseph's jaw tightened as he watched his father struggle for breath. Sarah could see the war in his eyes, duty to his father against the need to protect them all. Go, Samuel whispered when he could speak again. Lead them away. Let me die knowing you live free. You're not dying, Joseph said fiercely, but they all heard the desperation in it. Mary Elk Woman made the decision for them. Daniel, help me with Samuel. We ride east now, while there's time. She fixed Joseph with a stern look.
Your father gave you life. Don't waste it on foolish pride.
The goodbye was hurried, painful. Joseph embraced his father, whispering words in Apache that made the old man smile through his pain. Sarah pressed the medicine supplies into Mary's hands, along with what money she had left.
Thank you,
she said simply,
for everything.
Mary studied her with those knowing eyes. You walk a hard path now, white woman, but perhaps... She glanced between Sarah and Joseph. Perhaps hard paths lead to the most beautiful views. Then they were gone. Daniel leading Samuel's horse while Mary Elk Woman swept their tracks with a pine branch. Joseph and Sarah sat their horses in silence, watching until they disappeared over a ridge. He might die without me there, Joseph said, voice rough.
He might die anyway,
Sarah replied gently.
At least this way, he dies free, not watching his son hanged.
Joseph turned his horse north without another word, but Sarah saw him touch the medicine bundle at his chest, a son's prayer following a father's path. They rode hard, making no effort to hide their trail now. The plan was simple, be visible enough to draw all pursuit, buy the others time to reach safety. The land grew rougher as they climbed into the high country, snow lingering in sheltered places despite the spring sun. By afternoon, the dust cloud had resolved into individual riders. Sarah could make out uniformed cavalry and the darker clothes of civilian scouts. At their head, even at distance, she recognized Sheriff Pike's bulky form.
He's taking this personal, she observed.
Good, Joseph said grimly. Angry men make mistakes. They pushed higher into the mountains. Following trails Joseph seemed to know by instinct. Sarah's horse began to labor in the thin air, foam flecking its chest. They couldn't keep this pace much longer. There, Joseph pointed to a narrow canyon ahead. Good place to make a stand. I thought we weren't fighting. No, but they don't know that. They entered the canyon, walls rising steep on either side. Joseph dismounted, quickly gathering dried brush and what wood he could find. Understanding dawned as Sarah watched him build a hasty fire near the canyon's far end.
Smoke, she said. Make them think we're trapped, settling in to defend.
While we... He gestured to a barely visible trail snaking up the canyon wall. My people use this path for generations. Horses can make it, if they're mountain bred. Sarah looked at the trail narrow, crumbling in places, rising at an angle that made her stomach drop. And if they're not mountain bred, then we learn to fly.
Despite everything?
She laughed. It felt strange, laughing while running for their lives, but also right somehow. Joseph's rare smile answered hers. They set the brush smoldering, smoke beginning to rise thick and dark. Then Joseph led the way up the hidden trail, his horse picking its way with surprising delicacy. Sarah followed, trying not to look down at the increasing drop, trusting her mount's instincts over her own terror. Halfway up,
She heard shouts from below. The pursuit had reached the canyon. Seen the smoke. Perfect.
Yeah. Hold up there.
Pike's voice echoed off stone walls.
You're trapped. Come down peaceful, and maybe the woman doesn't hang ye.
Joseph paused, looking back at Sarah. She saw the question in his eyes. Was she sure she could still go back? Claim coercion. Might even be believed. Instead, she called down, "Go to hell, Pike, and take your tin badge with you." Gunfire erupted, bullets whining off rocks, but they were already too high, the angle too steep for accurate shooting. Joseph urged his horse upward, Sarah close behind, as curses and futile shots followed them. They crested the canyon rim as sunset painted the world gold and crimson. Below, Pike's men milled in confusion, some trying to find another way up, others arguing about what to do. It would take them hours to backtrack, find another route. "We bought time," Joseph said, breathing hard. "But not much. They'll have Indian trackers who know these trails too." Sarah's horse stood head down, sides heaving. She stroked its neck, whispering encouragement. "How far to Canada?" "Week of hard riding, maybe more with spring floods." He studied the northern horizon. "But there's something else first. A place my mother's people used. Sacred ground where—" He trailed off, and Sarah saw uncertainty in his face, the first she'd witnessed. "What is it?" "It's a place for ceremonies, visions, decisions." He met her eyes. "The old ways say a warrior should seek guidance before taking a wife, should know if the path is right." Sarah's heart skipped, taking a wife. "I'm asking wrong." Frustration crossed his features. "In my language, there are words for this that, Sarah, what I feel for you has no good translation. But I know I want you beside me, not just for days or months, but for whatever time the spirits grant us. I know your courage makes me stronger. Your laugh makes the hardest trail easier. I know." "Yes," Sarah interrupted. He blinked. "Yes. Yes to whatever you're asking, however you ask it." She moved her horse closer, reaching for his hand. "Joseph, I put on a dead man's uniform and broke you out of an army stockade. Do you really think I need ceremonies to know my own heart?" His fingers intertwined with hers, rough and warm. "White women have different ways. I wanted to honor them." "Then honor this. I choose you. Here, now, with lawmen on our trail and nothing certain except this moment." She squeezed his hand. "Is that clear enough?" His answer was to lean across the space between horses and kiss her. It was their first real kiss, no barriers of propriety or cultural confusion. Just two people claiming each other against all odds. Sarah felt the world narrow to the warm pressure of his lips, the solid strength of his hand in hers, the wild beauty of choosing love over every safer path. When they parted, breathless, the sun had nearly set. Stars were beginning to emerge in the darkening sky. "We should move," Joseph said, voice rougher than usual. "They'll try a night ascent if they're desperate enough." But he didn't release her hand, and they rode the next mile that way. Connected across the space between horses, the sacred place he'd mentioned lay another hour north, a grove of ancient pines surrounding a natural spring, untouched by white settlement. They made cold camp, not risking a fire that might be seen, wrapped in blankets beside the spring. Sarah listened to the night sounds, wind in pine needles, an owl's distant call. Joseph's steady breathing beside her. "Tell me about Canada," she said quietly. "What will we find there?" "I don't know," he admitted. "My mother's cousin crossed 2 winters ago. Said the government there is different. They make treaties and keep them. Mostly. The land is harsh but free. No reservations. No army forts watching every move. And they'll accept us, a white woman and an Apache man." "Maybe, maybe not." She felt him shrug. "But there's land enough to live away from those who judge us, to build something our own way." "A cabin," Sarah murmured, surprised by how much she wanted it. but not hidden away like my old one, something that welcomes people. With a barn for horses. I want to raise horses the old bloodlines, the ones that know these mountains. And children. The question slipped out before she could stop it. Joseph was quiet so long she feared she'd overstepped. Then, children who speak both languages, who know both worlds but aren't trapped by either. His arm tightened around her. Would you want? Yes, she said simply, though I can't imagine what we'll tell them about how their parents met. The truth, Joseph said, that their mother was brave enough to open her door in a storm, that their father was lucky enough to be freezing on the right doorstep. They talked through the night, painting futures with words while staying alert for sounds of pursuit. When dawn came, it brought both beauty and danger, the spring revealed as a crystal pool reflecting morning sky, but also dust rising again from the south. They found the trail, Joseph said unnecessarily. Time to go. But before they mounted up, he led her to the spring's edge, cupping water in his hands. He spoke words in Apache, a prayer or blessing or promise, maybe all three. Then he touched the water to her forehead, her lips, her heart. Now we're married, he said simply. In the eyes of my people and the spirits of this place, the rest is just paper and white man's law. Sarah repeated his gesture, speaking her own vows. In the eyes of my heart and whatever God watches over fools in love, I take you as my husband, for better or worse, in pursuit or peace, until the mountains fall. They sealed it with another kiss, this one tasting of sacred water and desperate hope. Then they mounted up and rode north again, married now by their own declaration, racing toward a border that might mean freedom or just a different kind of fight. Behind them, inexorable as sunrise, their pursuers climbed into the mountains. Sheriff Pike led them with the bitter determination of a man who'd staked his reputation on bringing back the fugitives. He'd chase them to Canada if necessary. Legal jurisdiction be damned. But Sarah found she wasn't afraid anymore. Joseph rode beside her, her husband now. Strange and wonderful to think it, and together they faced whatever came. The sacred spring had given them more than blessing. It had transformed them from two people running to one unit moving towards something better. Look, Joseph pointed ahead where the trail crested another ridge. See where the forest changes? That's the border valley. By tomorrow night. He didn't finish, but Sarah heard the hope in his voice. By tomorrow night, they might be beyond Pike's reach. They might find Samuel and the others safe. They might start building the life they'd painted in words through the dark hours. Or they might be caught, dragged back to face rope and judgment. But that was tomorrow's worry. Today, they rode together through country so beautiful it made her chest ache. Married in the eyes of everything that mattered, free in all the ways that counted. Race you to the ridge, she challenged, spurring her tired horse. Joseph's surprised laugh followed her. Then the thunder of hooves as he accepted the challenge. They crested the hill together, reining in to look back at the long miles they'd covered, forward to the promise of what lay ahead. The pursuit was gaining, but they were still free, still together. For now, in this moment between chase and capture, between old life and new, it was enough. The border valley stretched before them, a ribbon of green between snow-capped peaks. They'd ridden through the night again, pushing their exhausted horses to the limit. Now, with dawn breaking, Sarah could see the tree line that marked Canada so close she could almost taste freedom. Behind them, Pike's pursuit had swelled to nearly 30 riders. They'd gained ground through the night, fresh horses from a ranch they'd commandeered giving them the advantage. The dust of their approach was visible now, perhaps 2 hours behind. There, Joseph pointed to a grove of cottonwoods near a rushing stream. We rest the horses, or they'll die under us. Sarah didn't argue. Her mount was stumbling with every other step, foam thick on its chest despite the cool morning air. They dismounted by the stream, letting the animals drink while keeping watch on their back trail. We're not going to make it, Sarah said quietly. It wasn't despair. Just simple arithmetic. The border was still 10 miles off, their horses were done, and Pike was coming fast. Joseph pulled her close, his arms solid and real around her. Then we make our stand, together. I'm not sorry, she whispered against his chest. Not for any of it. Nor I. He pulled back to look at her, memorizing her face. To be your husband, for even these few days, it's worth whatever comes. A shout interrupted them. Riders, but not from behind from the east, moving fast along the valley floor. Sarah's heart sank. Pike must have sent men ahead to cut them off. But Joseph was smiling. Look closer, he said. The lead rider was Mary Elk Woman, her horse stretched out in full gallop. Behind her came Daniel's spotted horse and others Apache warriors, armed and painted for war. And there, impossibly, rode Samuel on a spare mount, upright despite his illness. They swept into the grove like an avenging wind. Mary Elk Woman leaped from her horse before it even stopped, fierce joy on her face. Did you think we'd let you have all the glory? She demanded. My cousins from the northern band, they came to help family. Samuel rode straight to his son, and they embraced on horseback. The medicine worked, the old man said, though Sarah could see he was still far from well. Well enough to ride, anyway. Well enough to stand with my son. Father, you shouldn't have what acted like a warrior one last time. Samuel's eyes blazed with renewed life. If this is my day to die, let it be standing free beside my family. The Apache warriors, 8 in all, formed up around them. Sarah recognized the tactical advantage immediately. The narrow valley meant Pike couldn't use his numbers effectively, and these men knew the terrain, knew how to fight in it. There's another way. Daniel's spotted horse said urgently. A box canyon, half-mile west, one way in, but there's a hidden trail out the back, Apache's secret for generations. A trap, Joseph said immediately. If they find the back trail. They won't, Mary Elk Woman said firmly. Not without Apache guides, and none ride with Pike. More shouts from behind. Pike's advance riders had spotted them. Time was running out. Go, one of the warriors said, an older man with scars that spoke of many battles. Take the white woman and Samuel. We'll hold them here, buy you time. No, Sarah said. No more splitting up. We've run far enough. She looked at Joseph, saw the same resolution in his eyes. They'd crossed too much ground, survived too much, to let others die for their freedom now. Then we make it interesting. Joseph said, he turned to the warriors, speaking rapid Apache. They grinned, fierce and eager. What's the plan? Sarah asked. You'll see. He helped his father onto a fresh horse, then mounted his own. Trust me. Always. They rode hard for the box canyon, Pike's shouts echoing behind them. Sarah could hear the sheriff cursing, ordering his men to cut them off. But the Apache warriors harried their flanks, firing shots that forced the pursuit to spread out, to slow down. The canyon walls rose around them, red rock glowing in morning light. It looked like a trap, and it was just not the way Pike would expect. Here, Daniel showed them where ancient floods had carved a narrow cleft in the back wall, hidden by a fall of rocks, invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. Single file only, leads up and out. Take my father through, Joseph told Mary Elk Woman. Get him to safety. And leave you to fight 30 men, she snorted. The years have made you stupid. Please. Joseph gripped her shoulder. He's all the family I have left. No, Samuel said firmly. Not all. He looked meaningfully at Sarah. You have a wife now, a future. Don't throw it away for an old man's pride. The thunder of hooves announced Pike's arrival. The sheriff rode at the head of his men. Face red with exhaustion and rage, they spread out across the canyon mouth, blocking any escape. It's over, Pike shouted. Surrender now, and I'll see the woman gets a fair trial. Keep fighting.
and you'll all hang from the nearest tree." Joseph stepped forward, Sarah beside him. The Apache warriors flanked them, weapons ready but not yet raised. "Sheriff Pike," Joseph called out, voice carrying clear. "You've chased us far from your jurisdiction. This is Indian land, treaty land. You have no authority here." "I've got all the authority I need." Pike patted his gun. "Now throw down your weapons. I have a better offer." Joseph said. He drew his knife, not threatening, but ceremonial. "Single combat, you and me. If I win, you ride away. If you win—" He glanced at Sarah. "We surrender." "No," Sarah grabbed his arm. "Joseph, he'll never honor—" "Yes, he will." Joseph's voice was quiet but certain. "Because his men are watching. Because he's built his reputation on being the big man, the tough sheriff. He can't back down from a challenge by a savage without losing face." Pike's men were murmuring, looking at their leader. Sarah saw the trap now, not the canyon, but pride. Pike's own ego boxed him in tighter than any walls. "Single combat?" Pike laughed, but it sounded forced. "Against you." "Unless the great Sheriff Pike is afraid of one Apache with a knife." That did it. Pike dismounted heavily, pulling his own blade. "When I gut you, boy, I'll do it slow. Make your woman watch." "Joseph," Sarah whispered urgently. "He's twice your weight." "And 3 times as slow." He kissed her quickly. "Have faith." The men formed a rough circle, Pike's deputies mingling uneasily with Apache warriors. Sarah noticed some of the younger soldiers looked uncomfortable. They'd signed on to catch fugitives, not watch their leader knife fight. Pike came in like a bull, all power and rage. Joseph danced aside, his movements fluid as water. The sheriff's blade whistled through empty air. "Stand still and fight, coward." Joseph said nothing, letting his silence enrage Pike further. The big man lunged again, overextending, and Joseph's knife flicked out, drawing a thin line of blood across Pike's arm. "First blood," Daniel murmured approvingly. Pike roared, charging wildly. This time Joseph didn't entirely dodge. He redirected, using Pike's own momentum to send him stumbling. The sheriff went to one knee, breathing hard. "You're old," Joseph said quietly, circling. "Soft from easy living. Your time is past. Pike, go home." "Never!" Pike surged up, knife sweeping in a vicious arc. Joseph bent back impossibly far, the blade missing his throat by inches. As Pike's weight carried him forward, Joseph struck not with his knife but with his knee, driving it into the sheriff's stomach. Pike doubled over, gasping. Joseph could have killed him then, knife poised at the exposed neck. Instead, he stepped back. "Yield," he said simply. Pike's response was to pull a hidden derringer from his boot. Everything happened at once, the gun swinging up, Joseph twisting aside, Sarah screaming a warning, the crack of gunfire. But not from Pike's weapon. The sheriff looked down in shock at the spreading red stain on his chest. Behind the circle, smoking rifle still raised, stood Tommy Morrison, the boy from town, Jim Morrison's son. "You—" Pike fell to his knees. "Why?" "Because you killed my real PA," Tommy said, voice steady despite his youth. 3 years ago. Said he was helping Indians, shot him in the back. Ma made me keep quiet, but I never forgot." Pike toppled forward, the derringer falling from nerveless fingers. His men stood frozen, uncertain what to do without their leader. "It's done," Joseph said into the silence. "You can take his body back. Say he died in the line of duty. Or you can try to finish this and join him. Choose." Carl Henderson, Pike's second, looked around the canyon. 30 men with rifles against 8 Apache warriors. 1 woman, 1 sick elder, and a boy. Should have been easy odds, but the warriors stood ready to die fighting. The woman held her rifle like she knew how to use it, and the boy had just proved he'd kill to protect these people. "We're done." Henderson said finally. Pike's dead. The army can chase their own fugitives. He gestured to his men. Mount up. They filed out slowly, taking Pike's body with them. Tommy Morrison stayed behind, looking lost now that his revenge was complete. Come with us, Sarah said gently. You can't go back to town after this. The boy nodded, tears finally coming. Mary Elk Woman put an arm around his shoulders, murmuring comfort in a mix of English and Apache. We need to move, Daniel said urgently. They might change their minds, or the army might be coming. They filed through the hidden trail, emerging on the far side of the canyon into Canadian territory. The invisible line meant everything and nothing. They were beyond use or law now. But borders were just human ideas. Safety would come from distance, from finding their place in this new land. They rode north through the day, spirits lifting with each mile. Samuel grew stronger, the crisis having somehow given him new life. Tommy rode with the Apache warriors, who were already teaching him their hand signals and trail marks. As sunset approached, they crested a final ridge. Below stretched a valley of such beauty, it stopped them all, green meadows threaded with silver streams, forests of pine and aspen, mountains standing guard on every side. There, Mary Elk Woman pointed to smoke rising from the valley floor. My cousin's band. They're expecting us. The camp welcomed them as family. Sarah found herself swept into a world of cooking fires and laughter. Children running between the lodges, dogs barking welcome. Women came to examine her pale skin and strange clothes, chattering in Apache and broken English. That night, they held a feast. Joseph and Sarah's spring wedding was celebrated properly, with drumming and dancing and gifts from people who barely knew them, but understood the courage their love had taken. Samuel rose to speak, his voice carrying new strength. My son found a woman brave enough to see past skin and stories. This gives an old man hope. Perhaps our children's children will live in a world where such courage isn't needed, where love is just love, not rebellion. Later, in a lodge set aside for them, Sarah lay in Joseph's arms, listening to the camp settle into sleep. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, learning the ways of his people, finding their own path between two worlds, building the life they'd dreamed of. But tonight, she was simply a woman holding her husband, safe in the circle of his people who had become her people. No regrets? Joseph asked softly. Sarah thought of her empty cabin, the cold judgment of Cedar Ridge, the narrow life she'd escaped. Then she looked at this man who'd walked through her door in a storm and changed everything. Never, she said, and sealed it with a kiss that tasted of freedom and forever. Outside, snow began to fall again, but this time it felt like blessing covering their tracks, hiding their path, keeping them safe in this new world they'd found together. The storm had brought them together. Love had carried them through. And now, finally, they were home. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I hope it touched your heart as much as it did mine. Please share in the comments where you're listening from. I love connecting with listeners around the world and hearing your thoughts on this tale of love conquering prejudice. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to Wild West Night. Hit that like button. And don't forget to click the hype button to help more people discover these powerful stories of the Old West. Until next time, keep riding toward your own horizons.